Modern Warfare 2 is finally here, and it is looking beautiful, but that being said, there are a few things we can do on our end to make it look even better, giving us an advantage in-game. And we start with on-demand texture streaming. This is on by default, and is the new go-to setting for Call of Duty to have high-quality graphics without downloading those huge HD texture packs. So yes, by doing this, it does take up a little more of your bandwidth and connection, but you do have some options here to limit that if it is taking a bit too much up for you. So you can enable download limits if you need to, and if you don't have much space left on your system, you can choose to allocate less space to the texture streaming cache. Is that how you say it? Cache? Cache? Either way, we can allocate less space if we need to, or you can just leave it on auto to have the most optimized texture streaming. Moving on from there, we have world motion blur and weapon motion blur. I recommend turning these both off. It does look pretty amazing when they are switched on. However, it's just much easier to see the map and your surroundings, and most importantly, the enemy when you do switch them off. And the same applies for film grain. Just put this straight down to 0. For depth of field, this isn't too important. Again, having it on does feel more immersive, as it blurs the space outside of the area you're aiming. However, that isn't realistic if that's what you're going for, and anyway, if we turn it off, we can just see everywhere more clearly, even if they're not down our direct line of sight. Next up, we've got Fidelity FX CAS, and it does exactly what it says here. Enhances the sharpness of scene rendering using contrast adaptive sharpening. Now, we could go into detail on what that exactly means, but all you need to know is that by enabling it and turning it right up to 100, the game looks a hell of a lot better. Now, this does require more processing from your system, so if you are on PC and you are getting some performance issues, you can turn this down or off. And the same applies for consoles, particularly the older generation consoles. And if there are any visual bugs you're experiencing, a solution may be to flick this off and the on-demand texture streaming. Anyway, moving on, we've got a 120Hz refresh rate option, and we want this switched on, which basically allows us 120 frames per second. So I'm on console, and if I go across to my settings, we can see that we are indeed on 120 frames per second, or 120 Hz. Then we have the FOV slider, or field of view slider. There's no confirmation yet whether this is on Warzone 2, but I can almost guarantee it since it's on Modern Warfare 2 and they're gonna share the same engine. Anyway, the best setting for this is down to personal choice, but I do recommend anything over 100 really. 120 can be a bit too much for some people as they find it hard to see in the distance. 110 is actually quite great for me. Of course, a larger field of view just allows us to see more around us. Then we have the ADS field of view option of affected or independent. We want this on affected where we aim in, and it matches whatever our field of view is on. If we have it on independent, it basically zooms in as much as it would on 80 FOV. By having it on affected, we still get to see plenty of space around us, even though we're aiming in. And then for the weapon field of view, I've gone on wide. So this may look a little odd to you at first because the weapon does appear much smaller, but again, it just allows us to see more around us. For my console players who have played Warzone, you can probably remember running something like the Owen gun and not being able to see a thing as it takes up most of the screen. Thankfully on Modern Warfare 2, that's not going to be an issue. We also have third-person field of view. I recommend putting this as high as you can go, which is just 90 in third person. For first-person and third-person camera movement, put this down to least, which is just 50% for both. If we leave them on default, which is 100%, you do get that realistic feeling of running around and things are jostling and moving, but a couple of things happen. One, it's kind of hard to see things going on around you, and two, you can actually get motion sickness. For brightness, we don't have to do too much. I'm on a pretty standard setting of 55 here. Thankfully, the game is nice and bright and we don't have to do too much. Now, if we go to interface, we can actually alter some of the color customization settings. For example, filter 2, I think, looks pretty good here. But, like I said, the colours are actually very good on Modern Warfare 2, and it's unlikely you'll need to have to do this. So I'm just going to leave mine on the default, and you can actually change your HUD colour palette to the various colorblind settings of Protanopia, Deuteranopia, and Tritanopia. Again, I really don't think this is necessary unless you do have some colorblindness. But if you do have some colorblindness or you just want it to look cooler, you can actually alter the colors in more detail than we've ever had before. I hope you found it useful, and if you want to find out the best controller settings for Modern Warfare 2 as well, then you should really check out this video.